We are live here in Nashville. Great state of Tennessee. Resistance Money crew all together.
Finally.
Indeed.
First time since Bedford.
But this time it's with you.
Yes.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for coming to Bedford. Thanks for repping the Choose Bedford shirt, Mr. Bailey, Bank of England.
It's a lifestyle, not a slogan. That's my philosophy.
You had a good time in Bedford. You've been to Bedford twice.
Yeah, man. I'm
Bedford OG.
bringing the family
Yeah.
next year.
It's
Nice.
on.
My wife's like, you're sharing too many pictures of beautiful rivers and soccer.
We've got the dates. We know when it's going to be now.
Dude, I looked at the last home match and I thought that's when it's going to be.
It's not then. No, it's there's a game on the 12th of April, which is the one before that. And the reason we've chosen that is on the Sunday, the ladies have a home game as well.
Amazing.
And so we might try and see if we can move the ladies to the Friday or place both on the same day or whatever. But like people can see both teams.
That'd be awesome.
We can expand it to 1,000 people.
What surprised me about Bedford is that, given some of the deprecating things you've said about it, in a way, it's self-deprecating.
Yeah.
I expected it to be a kind of like rundown Midwestern Rust Belt town, and it was very beautiful.
Meth town.
Yeah.
Gary, Indiana.
yeah. It was very beautiful.
Well, look, you know what it's like when it's your hometown. You see the worst bits.
Yeah.
It's like your kids. You see the worst bits in your kids. Like everyone's like, if your kids go to, you got kids?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So when your kids go to play at someone's house and their parents return them, like, oh my God, your kids are angels. You're like, no, they're fucking not. It's like that. It's like your hometown. You just see the worst bits. But actually, no, I mean, I love the place. And
Bedford is good.
yeah, it is good. I've got a plan for it for next year.
And then the 5-year plan has you as mayor.
I
Many people are saying
totally
this.
does.
Yeah. Not a great mayor right now.
No, he's another great mayor. I oscillate on that. The only way I'll become mayor is if I can actually find someone to do the day-to-day job, because I don't want to do that. I'm too busy. But I've got a plan for the next one, because we set up this fund to give out money to talented young kids, and we've given out 10 grants now. But part of the fund's in Bitcoin, and nobody's taken Bitcoin. So I think what I'm going to do is ahead of the event is I'm going to make an open offer to anyone in the town. There's a $250 grant in Bitcoin if you want to Bitcoinize your business. So if you need to buy books or education or we'll allow to buy it. And then if you do, we'll give each one of you a hardware wallet and we'll load up with like $100 of Bitcoin. So like trying to Bitcoinize the town ready for everyone coming next year.
Yeah. Smart.
Which will be awesome. Anyway, good to get you all together.
Good to be here.
Just before we close down the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah, we're last
You've told the story before. We have to hear it though from you. What's happening with the end of
we're
this
retiring.
era?
We're done. Me and Danny are like,
Game
fuck this
over.
shit.
You guys want us to take it over?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's wild. We don't like these Bitcoiners. They're fucking annoying. We're gonna go manage a football team. Yes. End of what would it be? 850 episodes?
Over 850, yeah.
860
Wow,
episodes. Honestly,
By the time it finishes, yeah.
how many shows are we making this week?
14, 15?
There's like 4 I'm looking forward to.
Wow, don't say that.
Everyone's going to think they're one of the 4.
Look, no, do you know what it is? Is how many times you have to make the same show over and over again. So this is new. This is interesting, right? We did one with Matthew Pines yesterday. Unbelievable. But generally speaking, you're making shows where you've made the content before. And like 4 more years of this, getting new people coming in, you have to make the same shows again. Don't want to fly anymore. It's time to. Hey, I think you'd appreciate this. Listen, I think the next phase of Bitcoin is coming out of the niche. So why have a niche show?
Yeah.
That's it.
And Bitcoin's still definitely going to be a part of the new show.
Yeah.
It's just not going to be the only thing we talk about.
There's a new show?
Oh, did we not announce that?
I just assumed it's the Peter McCormick show.
That's a good guess.
Yeah. Maybe not Peter, just McCormick show.
Just Danny? Oh.
Something like that. No, look, dudes, I've done like 400 flights in the last 7 years. I'm fucking wrecked. My body's wrecked. My mind's wrecked. I want to build a studio in London. I only want to do interviews in person. And there's not enough people in England to do a Bitcoin show. So it will be some Bitcoin, some heavy metal, some football, some weirdos, whatever. But it's...
Nice.
So you guys will be all right with the weirdos?
And the football.
We will be the weirdos if you want.
You can be all of them. And we would absolutely have you on the show without doubt.
Nice.
Because you guys are very special to us. And
Likewise.
Oh, fucking hog, man. All right, guys, books out. How's it gone? Reception. The reception. I know the reception's been fucking brilliant, but from your perspective,
We had a deal with a publisher that they were originally going to publish the paperback for $50 each, which is obviously unacceptable. So we made a deal. If we don't sell 1,000 copies, we will personally buy them. So we were on the hook for up to $50,000 US if we didn't sell 1,000 copies. We sold 1,000 copies. We are no longer on the hook to the publisher.
Let's go.
The price is down to $30, and people are still buying them.
how many have you sold? Can you say?
1,200.
Nice.
We're across the mark that actually mattered the most to us, just to be off the hook.
I saw you were the number 1 rated philosophy book on Amazon for a while.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Take that,
For a while.
Descartes.
But reception. I mean, there was like a week on Twitter where everyone was just like posting their photo of it.
Yeah.
which must be nice.
We didn't encourage
that felt
anyone
great.
to post photos of books, but man, we sure liked it when they did.
It's
And
good, though.
it felt really good. Yeah. And people still are. People are receiving them in far-flung places that took a long time to get there. And so, yeah, it feels really nice. And we haven't, nobody who's read it has disliked it. Even the Bitcoin critics who have read it have said positive things about
Not one dissenter.
Who's actually read it?
it. Yeah.
Oh,
People who actually read the book tend to like it, which is just cool.
Yeah.
so hold on. People haven't read it and they've criticized it.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty common.
The fuck are these people?
Well, the
We don't
cover
wanna give
has
them any
the
extra.
communist fist on it. They don't like that. They don't like that it says Bitcoin instead of Monero or Ethereum.
There are people that criticize the ideas that simply must be in the book because it's a book about Bitcoin, which aren't actually in the book. So they just assume that they're in the book.
Which is great.
Yeah.
We like it all.
Yeah.
I've seen the reception has been universally brilliant. Everyone's loving it. How is it? How's it work? How do 3 people come to consensus on the writing of one book?
It's like a multi-sig.
We have 2 multi-sigs. There's the 3 of 3 for the most important decisions that we make. And you have to wait. So we're in different time zones. So you wait till all 3 people have weighed in on something. But then there's the 2 of 3 multi-sig. If 2 of the 3 have agreed, then it is so. And the other guy has to fall in line no matter how he feels.
It gets really interesting when there's a tie-breaking vote.
That's right.
Did you all write every chapter? Because I know one of them's based on like your previous paper.
Sure.
So are some of them just you writing them, or do you all chip in?
We would divvy up initial chapters, but we would all rake every chapter over the coals individually. So we hope that every chapter has a joint ABC voice.
It started 2 summers ago in Wyoming when Craig and Andrew came, and we sat in my office and we had 10 days. So we wrote a chapter a day for 10 days, just the first like 4 to 5 pages together. And then from there, we kind of saw where each chapter is going, and then we assigned them. But every time you get stuck, it's awesome because someone has made progress somewhere else, and you can go there and tighten that up and add some thoughts and
Or
stimulate you to
delete
keep working.
their entire work from the previous day.
Did that happen?
Oh, often. Especially the jokes. We disagree a great deal on the jokes that belong in the book. So the ones that belong, there's a lot of really bad jokes that were cut. Let's just put it that way.
Craig's jokes were great.
I think that's the consensus. I was often on the other end of the 2 of 3 for that one.
There were some we had to tone down though.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to know.
Craig wanted to go
Yeah.
for the jugular. And there were some. We had a book workshop in Seattle that AIER sponsored and the Bitcoin Policy Institute sponsored, and we had some people who weren't as into the Bitcoin world, and we also had some crypto people there.
Some
and
what?
Some general
People you'd invite on the McCormick show.
crypto. Jerry Brito from Coin Center was there.
Jerry's
Chris
great.
Berg from Australia was there. They were fantastic, and they helped us a ton to tone down a lot of the criticisms of non-Bitcoin projects. You don't have to say this is a pro-Bitcoin book. It's not an anti-other things book. You don't have to be anti-everything else. And we aren't anti-everything else, but I think we added some of those things in just because we had absorbed them from Bitcoin Twitter. And it was like, yeah, we actually don't need to say that to make the point that Bitcoin is awesome.
Someone made the point to me recently. They said about Ethereum, it's like you can hate on Ethereum as much as you want, but in certain places in the world, that's better than the fiat currency.
Yep.
Right. I mean, banking is even more centralized than Ethereum.
Yeah.
And Ethereum's open 24/7, 365. So it's an improvement over what a lot of people have.
I just can't be bothered to have that fight anymore. All right. You want to shake hands? All right, cool.
Jerry Brito did require us to delete one of my favorite jokes, which was about Christine Lagarde, convicted criminal.
Yeah, we had a lot of
President
sides like
of
that.
the European Central Bank.
We know.
I'm surprised. Yeah, there's not a picture of her and Senator Elizabeth Warren somewhere around here.
I know
Yeah,
we
where's
don't,
your-
we don't have a screen
You
here.
didn't set up the ship.
Yeah, so every fucking
It's not on
trip.
camera now.
Yeah, but we still could have done.
Just for the vibe. All right.
Every
I'll
trip
do
we have a
that.
person, and so the last trip we had Trump because it was just turned out Trump had just been pro Bitcoin and talked about Ross Ulbricht, and so we had Trump in the background. Everyone, fuck me, the emails and the comments on YouTube, complete people losing their shit. They're like, you can't have Trump there. If you have Trump there, you're going to turn away half your audience. Like we always have the main character.
It's always a joke. Like there's been Larry Fink up there.
yeah, Udi,
Yeah. Udi.
Udi. We had Udi, 4 Udis.
Yeah. Schiff.
Shiv. Who else have we had?
I don't know. Jamie Dimon. We've had all sorts.
Yeah. Who would be now? Who's the person at the moment?
I mean, still Trump, isn't it?
He's the political honey badger.
No, you can't. You couldn't go trip to trip with Trump.
I think Zuck's going to be at this conference, so we could go for Zuck.
Zuck is based.
He's becoming base.
He's gangster now.
I kind of like him now. I didn't used to, and it's weird. I don't know why, but all of a sudden I feel
he
like
has a
positive
change in
feelings towards
you
him.
get a tan.
He has a twinkle in his eye that he never had before.
Yeah.
I think so. A
He's
little
more human.
humanity.
Have you seen that picture of him? Where he's got like a fro at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen this
The
picture?
zoomer.
He looks like a
Yeah,
short
zoomer,
chipster.
and it's got like a gold chain. Yeah. But the problem is like as base and as cool as he's got, I keep thinking of that video at the MMA when he's like the lost individual.
Yeah.
Do you know? Have you seen this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And the green lines there kind of tell
Yeah.
the story.
Hey, Zuck's cool. Zuck's a Bitcoiner.
Yeah.
If Zuck's here, that will be.
I've said it on 2
Incredible.
podcasts now, and he's probably not going to be. So
This will come out afterwards anyway.
yeah, it will. So I'll be wrong.
You're going to look like a fool.
Yeah.
Damn fool.
Is this the first peer-reviewed Bitcoin book, Bitcoin article, Bitcoin piece ever?
There are other peer-reviewed books that talk about Bitcoin or that treat Bitcoin a bit here or there, but this is the first monograph that's all about Bitcoin. So Larry White, for example, has a book called Better Money with Cambridge University Press. About 1/3 of it is Bitcoin. This is all Bitcoin.
I've never heard of his, but
No, I've not.
must be shit.
It's really good, actually.
Is it really?
What benefits do you get from it being peer-reviewed in terms of like maybe your colleagues seeing it, that kind of thing?
We were thinking of this long term. So right now, I mean, we're selling fewer copies because it has to be more expensive. It took a lot longer to publish than we thought it would. We've been promoting it. It feels like forever before it actually came out. But it's something that can be in libraries. It can be in school bookstores.
Is that the rule for a library? It has to be peer-reviewed.
I'm not sure. It
libraries
can be
like-
self-published.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
I see.
That's the rule in general.
Yeah.
Very few libraries will purchase self-published books. So the BTC magazine books don't really count.
I see. Interesting.
And so we just wanted there to be a Bitcoin positive book that students could be directed to, that parents, grandparents, friends could be directed to, that has the imprint of a well-known, well-respected academic publisher on it. So people could, if they trust institutions, have that sort of institutional approval.
Useful in university classrooms, all sorts of stuff.
But there has been that criticism of the peer review process. Is that just, is that a fair criticism? I mean, you would say it was Eric Weinstein.
Yeah, I think he's very anti-peer review. So
Yeah.
I think he just sees it as like gatekeeping. I don't want to speak for him, but I'm pretty sure that's his view.
I mean, the gatekeeping is hard. The original press that we approached, Oxford University Press, it's the top press in philosophy. We went through a couple rounds of revise and resubmit, which is exactly like it sounds. And on the third round, they ghosted us, and we've had a hard time breaking through.
Is that because it's Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Not just that it's Bitcoin, but also that it's a case for Bitcoin.
That it's pro-Bitcoin.
Yeah.
In fact, we were told at one point, you can't really have an argument that has a pro-Bitcoin slant. And we're very confused by this because the whole point of philosophy is to have an argument that actually has a substantive conclusion for or against something. You have a book on feminism, it's not going to be like, oh, this, that. No, it'll be either for or against anything that's remotely interesting. But with Bitcoin, we just couldn't convince these guys in particular that it was okay to be for it.
Did they give you a reason?
Not after they ghosted us.
They gave us many reasons.
Yeah.
We responded to each of them. And then in the end, they just stopped giving reasons, but didn't say yes. They also didn't say no. They just stopped responding.
But it's spiky. I mean, We began with the claim that Bitcoin is for criminals. And that's right. Bitcoin is for criminals.
It is.
Both good and bad. I mean,
There are good criminals.
Yeah.
Yeah. Martin Luther King Jr., convicted criminal.
Yeah. There you go.
Jesus Christ, convicted criminal. Donald Trump, convicted criminal. Many such cases.
yeah. Yeah.
Jeffrey Dahmer, also convicted criminal. You know, these guys are all over the place.
I feel like Dharma when I wear my glasses at the moment. It's a little bit Dharma.
Very nice.
Those are nice.
Yeah, I have to have them at the moment for reading. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I want a conviction now. Have you ever been convicted of anything?
Never been arrested.
I've been arrested once.
Why?
I can't tell that story.
Episode 1 of the McCormick Show.
I'll tell a little bit of that story. You know when it might have been different for you, but when I was, because I'm the age I am, I'm mid 40s. There was a big thing when I was a young teenager. When people would go to France, they would come back with bangers.
Yeah.
You know the
yeah. Like little sticks of dynamite.
yeah. So I got arrested for an incident, with bangers. I'll tell you about that later. But I was never convicted. They just phoned my parents, and I got in so much fucking trouble. Okay, so let's dig into it. Is Bitcoin good?
One thing we found when asking that question
Can I just take a moment? I absolutely love the way you do this, baby. You go. You compose yourself.
I was actually waiting for the multi-sig to implicitly approve, and I'll go first. Because I just could feel that would be the right thing to do. And they did. They gave me the space.
I was going to say yes, but one thing we found.
It's the calmest voice. It's soothing. Anyway, I rudely interrupted you.
Well, guys, what do you think? Is Bitcoin good?
My silence was approval.
Yeah.
Go ahead and take it.
One thing we found when asking a question like this is that it's tempting to replace it with the question, is Bitcoin good for me? And then you're off to bag pumping or bag dumping. So what we tried to do here was to give a bit more precision to the question, is Bitcoin good for the world? And to give a framing device that helps us to ask that question and not ask questions only about our own perspective and whether Bitcoin is good for us. So that's one of the fundamental questions of the book, is Bitcoin good for the world? And maybe Brad or Craig want to talk about how we framed that broader, more neutral question.
Sure. So the main case isn't that you should buy Bitcoin or that anyone else should buy Bitcoin, but it's to come to the conclusion that you should be glad that Bitcoin exists, and that's it. It's a very simple conclusion. We have a simple case for it, and we've lobbied this case around with you guys once before. So suppose you take a pill and it erases all your memories. And so you're behind this veil, call it the veil of ignorance. And after you take this pill, you don't know who you are, what color your skin is, where you were born, which God you worship. But you have a task, which is to answer this question about whether or not you'd like to enter back into the world with all the memories you had, but not knowing what they are. With Bitcoin. So do you enter into the world with Bitcoin, or do you enter into a world where Bitcoin has been erased out of existence? And if you want to answer that question responsibly, you have to go through a whole bunch of empirical data and philosophical arguments about Bitcoin's impact on the world. And we go through this case and say at the end, when you tally up Bitcoin's harms, which there are some, and we're honest about, and its imperfections, which we're also honest about, Bitcoin's overall good for the world. It has good consequences, and it makes the world a better place.
Do you agree?
Yeah, it involves knowing for each person whether they're better off in a Bitcoin world or not a non-Bitcoin world, because from behind the veil of ignorance, you could be any of them. So you need to know not just the facts about your own life, but the facts about all of their lives. And the trick, obviously, is that even if you enter the world again in your own body, they're all people too. They still exist. So this is a useful device for trying to live life from their perspective. But we don't ignore who we are when we evaluate things. But I think this helps us to try to get into their perspectives. And then we think about people who live under authoritarian regimes. Are they better off with Bitcoin or without? People who live under hyperinflation or just high or double-digit inflation? Are they better off with Bitcoin or without? And when you tally all them up, you might think Bitcoin's actually really bad for me, but I should still support it because it's good for all these other people, and I'm no more important. I'm no more special than them.
So who is it not good? Because we're talking net good. If we're talking, there's some people it's not better for.
Jamie Dimon.
Jamie Dimon, authoritarians, elites.
Yeah.
Victims of ransomware. It's not, maybe in some cases, wholly good for them.
People who suffer.
But that's only in that instance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
People who suffer under the brutality of North Korea, which in part is funded by the Lazarus Group, which uses Bitcoin. So they might be benefited by Bitcoin in some respects if you can leave North Korea and take your Bitcoins with you, but you might be harmed in others.
Okay.
Those who can't benefit from Bitcoin are probably harmed in North Korea by Bitcoin because it's very useful for the reigning regime.
But that's
As
how-
a sanctions
yeah.
evasion tool, especially.
Okay, and so when you created that framework, did you put numbers behind it?
Sometimes we do.
Yeah.
So for example, we have a chapter on financial exclusion. Many millions of people worldwide don't have access to banks, and there are all sorts of reasons why. Sometimes it's because there's no banking infrastructure around. Sometimes it's because people don't trust the banks that are around, and sometimes it's because people don't have access to an internet-connected device or the internet overall. But when you tally up all the people who do have an internet-connected device, who do have access to the internet, who just don't trust the banking system, there are tens of millions of people worldwide. So the people that would benefit from Bitcoin, Bitcoin's existence, it's something like 1/16 of the population or something of the global population, and that's a sizable number of people. And if you're behind the veil and making this decision, you have something like a 1 in 16 chance of being someone that could benefit from Bitcoin and wouldn't use the other alternatives. I don't play Russian roulette. 1 in 16 chance of being financially excommunicated is not a chance that I would take. So I would choose the Bitcoin world in that case. So it's these kinds of calculations that we do make along the way.
And the 1 in 16 number is just with respect to financial exclusion. If you're thinking about suffering under authoritarianism, that might be a 1 in 2 or a 1 in 4 number. So that's just that.
60%, I think, according to the...
And these populations don't always overlap either.
Right.
They do probably overlap in many cases, but it's not just a matter of saying that half the world's under an authoritarian regime, and of those people, all the financially excluded are among them. No, there are people who are financially excluded who do not live in an authoritarian regime.
There's also the other element of it, like the village in Malawi that are benefiting from Bitcoin mining. They're not actually benefiting from Bitcoin, the asset themselves, but they're benefiting from, these Bitcoin miners turning up at the mini grid and giving them electricity when previously they couldn't afford it.
Right. These are positive externalities of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Even just Bitcoin disciplining central bank policy, that benefits people, even if there's no direct benefit.
How much time have you spent thinking about whether Bitcoin is good for governments? In that there's two ways of looking at this. It may not be good for the individuals within government who manipulate the system for votes, they manipulate the money, they manipulate it for their friends. But ultimately, the function of government should be net positive for society. And so perhaps, we just had the conversation before this. We were with Luke Wyoming and Preston Pitch, and we were talking about this debt crisis, which mathematically is only going to get much worse. But Bitcoin can be something that can help. Luke talked about the idea of at the moment there's an issue with selling long duration bonds, right? 30-year bonds. But he said if you back those in part by Bitcoin, that would be good. That would give more trust in the bond. So if you spend much time thinking about the complexities of whether Bitcoin's good for government.
Here are two ways in which it might. Both of these are in the book, at least in passing. One is through discipline. So this is what Craig was talking about. Think of any other sector. Is it good to have competition? The answer tends to be yes. So when there's an exit option, that tends to make an institution better when people can leave it. And Bitcoin is just a monetary exit option. And unlike other exit options, you don't have to emigrate to take it. So to leave other institutions, let's say bad schools, bad elections, bad laws, you actually have to leave your country. That's enormously expensive. Bitcoin, you just buy some Bitcoin and run a node. So low cost of exit. That just makes institutions better because they have to compete. So that's better for the people under the institutions and better for the institutions themselves. And then second, maybe in a more selfish way, if you can benefit from holding Bitcoin, then institutions can benefit from doing that too. If you can benefit from spending Bitcoin, institutions can do that too. So in a world with more international sanctions, that's more fractured in market structure, if the US dollar dominance subsides in some ways, then having an asset that can't be controlled by a Russia-China alliance or an America-EU alliance or any kind of alliance, I could see that being helpful for many kinds of institutions.
So it's like a forcing function for institutions to operate in the way they're meant to operate.
That's right. So think about the Church of England. There's the Puritans and the Separatists. The Puritans tried to purify the church from within. They did good work, but their work didn't work until people left for the Americas. And as the church's bleeding population, they start to like, holy shit, people are leaving. We got to fix this up, bro. And
I think that's a direct quote.
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So why do you think Bitcoin has been so complicated and difficult for people to understand? If it's good for the world at net, it's good for the individuals, good for the institutions, we still have this like battle ahead of us to how people understand and convince them this.
There's so much going on in Bitcoin. So first of all, I think a lot of people just haven't thought about money. They've taken for granted that money is dollar bills. They've thought that or implicitly thought that the number on the screen when they look at their bank account represents some bills somewhere. They don't know how money is introduced. They don't know how money is destroyed. They don't know anything about how money is created and distributed. So there's a hurdle to get over there. Then when you start explaining Bitcoin, you have so many different aspects of explanation. So we're talking about Bitcoin as a tool of resistance against, managers, mediators, and makers. So there's three aspects of money: the creation of money, the managing of money, and the transacting of money, all of which Bitcoin sort of upends or reverses. So then you have to understand how all those things happen. On the making side, there's all the central banks. On the managing side, there's all the commercial banks. And on the mediating side, there's Visa, MasterCard, and all the banks. So there's just so many moving parts to Bitcoin that are all different from what we're used to. And it's also hard to explain just one aspect of them. You tend to sort of miss the interesting bits if when I started, it was the mediating. It was transactions. I was like, oh, this is like a better version of Western Union. I didn't understand the supply cap. I didn't understand the creation, mining, none of that stuff. Thankfully, I still thought it was interesting, even though I thought it was just a competitor to Western Union. Other people think of it as, competitors to central banks. And so trying to explain all of it at the same time and see how it's different and why the ways in which it's different make it better. It's just a really long task. It takes 300 or so pages to explain and convince.
Because your relationship with money goes from a passive one to an active one. Because historically, you just don't think about it. When you're a kid, you get a toy, which is like a little supermarket, and you learn to move money, and then your parents give you, $1 and you go into the shop, and it's natural. You have to, essentially with Bitcoin, start to understand money and rethink money.
Yeah. Your early task is just to get more money. That's all your relationship with money is I just want more of it. Then you start understanding it and seeing the flaws in it too. I mean, it takes a while to see why it's flawed and why it conceptually can't work in certain ways, and why Bitcoin is better from a theoretical level. So we tell some practical stories in the book about people for whom Bitcoin has been better, but then we also give some conceptual arguments about why it makes sense to have an algorithm determining the distribution of the money rather than some person deciding on it.
Because that just comes down to human incentives.
Yeah.
You mix money creation with humans. It's a bad recipe.
It's going to go wrong at some point. You might get lucky and have 10 good humans in a row who are also really smart and understand the incredibly complex nature of a national economy. But all it takes is one dumb person or one selfish person, and you're in big trouble.
The bad king.
Bitcoin has enemies too, and these pollute the water and make it harder to understand Bitcoin. The world's just pumped with misinformation about Bitcoin, especially in mainstream sources
Greenpeace.
and from
DeVries.
and from our guys, academia. Unfortunately, the fiat academics. I mean, we're fiat academics, but the other fiat academics, they like to lie about Bitcoin.
And I think that often Bitcoin proponents haven't helped matters by tying Bitcoin down with ideological baggage that most people don't accept. So if the wider population thinks that you have to buy into Austrian economics, or you have to eat meat, or you have to be a Trump voter or something, then it will take some people longer to give Bitcoin a fair shake because their bias is against Bitcoin because the people that they trust don't like those things, and these people don't like those things.
Do you think that's changing though?
I do think it's changing, and we hope that our book plays a role because our book is non-ideological. We don't tie it down with hardly any baggage at all, and so we can just boil down the case for Bitcoin to its essence. And I think it is changing overall. Some people criticize the things that have happened with the Bitcoin conference.
Yep.
By incorporating former President Trump into the conversation. I think that we might disagree about this. I don't know, but I do think that in time, this kind of move does force everyone to take it more seriously.
I mean, you have to take it more seriously if the former president, potential next president. Did the ideology serve a purpose, though, at a time where Bitcoin was more fragile? So the ideology creates a kind of like a resistance around it, like an army to protect it.
I think so. I mean, so if you look at how Satoshi announced Bitcoin originally, he announced Bitcoin to the peer-to-peer foundation by heralding its peer-to-peer features. And he announced its limited supply cap and its ability to function someday as something like digital cash to the cryptography mailing list, many of which who were original cypherpunks for which digital cash was the holy grail. And so you market Bitcoin to people who will like it because it speaks to them and in a way that meshes with their own particular ideologies. And I think that people are often critical of Saifedean, but his book has sold like 1 million copies, and he's done a great good for orange pilling multitudes of people. And I do think that this kind of militant...
I don't think the criticism's really the book.
Well, there are
aspects of the book, maybe the
there are
ideological aspects of the book about modern art.
Yeah, the ideological aspects of the book, which many Bitcoin proponents still accept. And but I do think that provided a protective layer over Bitcoin.
Yeah,
not just Saifedean, but many people early on. So I wouldn't criticize them. I think they did a great good.
The ideology can then, it can serve a purpose in the short term, but it can't survive expansion to hundreds of millions of people.
Yeah, as it often happens.
Yeah.
With new movements. Yeah.
So what does that do to movements then? Can that cause it to slow down? Or do you think the incentives are so strong with Bitcoin it doesn't matter?
Well, think about like leg braces. So it's like in Forrest Gump, a leg brace can help you stand upright and not to fall. It can serve as this kind of protective and stabilizing force. But after a while, it's going to prevent you from running. And so I think at a certain point we need to lay the ideology down, and so that it doesn't hobble further adoption.
Run, Forrest, run.
Yes, exactly.
I always find this when I interview any youth, I always find myself going, So I feel like we're in a phase now where the world is becoming more accepting to Bitcoin, but still isn't quite ready for it. And one of the things we've discussed this quite a bit is that I see a world where they become almost like counter Bitcoin revolutionaries, in that for example, when I was in Santiago, Chile, there was a revolution which is based on the wealth gap, and it was triggered by one act, which was to raise the price of the metro, but it was the trigger of a number of actions, which included pension reforms that eventually just created too wide a wealth gap, and there was a small revolution. And we've had big revolutions based on wealth gaps, but the distribution of Bitcoin is arguably fair, or as fair as it could be, or a fair system. But ultimately, if we're very early, there's going to be a huge wealth gap in Bitcoin. When I was in El Salvador, I was making a film, and there were people who were ideologically against Bitcoin because they were ideologically against Bukele. Mm-hmm. And they saw Bitcoin as another tool to steal land and prosperity from the indigenous Salvadorans. So they had like an anti-Bitcoin protest. And I don't think they realized what they were protesting against, but they did. So one of the things we've been kind of knocking back and forth is, in a world where Bitcoin is super successful in terms of reach, it may not be super successful in the short term in terms of wealth distribution. And you might have these kind of anti-Bitcoin protests.
That would be a sign of success if there was a physical, attention-getting protest that explicitly had Bitcoin as its target of ire, as has happened in El Salvador. Krista Rose was actually there for that. He talks about this in some podcast or somewhere, that he was randomly in El Salvador and saw a protest with people with anti-Bitcoin signs.
I was there.
You were at the same one?
I was at the same one. They would have signs with a Bitcoin logo with a red line through it. And they were protesting the square, and they were marching on Parliament. I got attacked on it. Like, they were finding my Instagram and messaging me and telling me I'm doing business with Bukele and helping use Bitcoin to steal the prosperity from the Salvadorians. Like, they were against it.
This isn't particular to Bitcoin. We live in a world where most things of any real interest, anything that's substantive, will get one way or another associated with one of two political tribes in the United States. So maybe I shouldn't speak to the whole world, speak to the United States. That if it's interesting and important, let's say Taylor Swift, it'll get associated, or people are trying to associate with one political tribe or another. So to the extent that Bitcoin's interesting, it's probably inevitable that, like everything else, it will find some valence. Hopefully can overcome that. But I don't think it should be surprising that Bitcoin should suffer that kind of polarization, being pulled towards one side or the other political spectrum.
It would be hard to completely undo the wealth gap that already exists, because for any new thing that comes along, people are going to be willing to trade some of their wealth for it. And so if you already have a lot of wealth, you're going to be able to trade for it. So something that tries to evenly distribute an asset across an entire population and then make that asset worth something. I think like WorldCoin tried this, but very, very big downsides. And it's never going to work. So I think one thing we have to do, and one thing that we try to do in the book, is not have this fanciful idea of what the world should be like, but compare to what the world is currently like. So look at current wealth distribution and how much of the wealth the top 1% has, the top 0.1%, et cetera, and then ask, is Bitcoin better or worse than that? It turns out to be really easy to compare Bitcoin to other cryptocurrencies because they have public ledgers. It turns out to be really hard to compare Bitcoin to the US dollar or the British pound or something like that, because a lot of people's wealth isn't in those things. It's in land or securities or whatever that can be traded for those things. But when we look at reports of wealth disparity, Bitcoin's supply equity ratio, so how much the top has, a network distribution factor, how much the bottom has, is the best among cryptocurrencies. And I think would be, if we could get accurate numbers, I would guess that it's significantly better than current wealth distribution.
And that's getting distributed more and more as time goes on,
right.
Whereas the fiat system goes the other way.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And trend lines matter here more than snapshots. So just looking at the way it is this year is not going to tell you very much. But the trend line for Bitcoin has always been wider distribution. I doubt you could say that the same is true for the US dollar. If we had a full look into the public ledger of the US dollar. I doubt that the trend line would look the same.
And that's largely because it keeps getting the overall pile keeps getting bigger, but the amount of the new portion of that pile keeps going to people who already have a lot.
So on the one hand, I think that at a certain point, we'll go back up with concentration. This, in my opinion, is just how the world works.
Yeah.
So for example, if you reset everyone right now to zero, who would be a millionaire and a billionaire in 10, 20 years? Well, I think someone like Elon would find himself up near the top again. So money just filters up to people with original ideas, creative ideas, people who work really hard. And I don't think Bitcoin is going to solve, wealth gaps in general.
Nor should it though either.
Right, exactly. But on the other hand, we can't just look at the gap, the current gap in the actual world. You also have to think about what would have happened if Bitcoin hadn't existed. And many people who've become wealthy with Bitcoin wouldn't have been wealthy otherwise. So in some ways, I think that even the unequal distribution that we already have has attributed to a more equal distribution overall globally.
There's another fairness thing happening here. So you will often see like the criticism of rich people. Certain commie type people will say that there should be no billionaires, or billionaires shouldn't exist, or tax the rich, or whatever. And I always think there's two ways of looking at that. There's a nuanced way to explain to these people what they're right and wrong about. What they shouldn't do is demonize people having money and earning money, because it's you want people to be prosperous and wealthy and create businesses. But I think it's right to identify the fact that we have a system which, once you're in a certain wealth, once you've achieved a certain amount of wealth, that system accelerates your wealth because you have the asset and you are an owner of assets. And that is a fair thing to criticize, that the system is actually punishing them. It's the system that's broken. But if we live in a world where the money is an asset, everyone can surely benefit from it.
And I think this is a difference between proof of work networks and proof of stake networks as well. The more you have that you can stake, you don't sort of lose anything by staking it. You don't have to give up anything. It just more comes to you magically, it seems. Whereas with proof of work, no matter how much Bitcoin you have, you constantly have to be, if you want more Bitcoin, giving up something, whether it's money of some other kind, or whether it's energy, or whether it's wasting your processing cycles of hardware that you own, but somehow you have to be giving up something. And I think, Bitcoiners should like the proof of work model better, where in order to get more wealthy, you should have to do something. It shouldn't just be automatically granted to you.
I actually disagree about that. The proof of stake business.
Finally.
So maybe Craig needs to weigh in and break this tie.
Now we get to see you guys at
I think
work.
Craig's on your side.
Well, I think you do give up something with proof of stake. It's the opportunity cost of capital. So you lock up your ETH and you can't spend it on goods and services. You can't invest it in other stuff. So you are giving up something, which is the ability to use that capital somewhere else. So you're making a sacrifice, just as you do when you make a sacrifice to buy electricity and chips in a proof of work system.
I think it depends where you are in that proof of stake system. So if you're the Ethereum Foundation or you're Vitalik and you have a huge influence about moving to this new system, the cost of capital really is like, where could you have put that Ethereum elsewhere? Could you convert it to dollars or invest it? They got so much fucking Ethereum, it just sits there in a wallet. So there was no real cost of capital to them, in that they just get to, all that Ethereum that's not doing anything now. Well, there was a cost of capital to them of them being in a proof of work system.
They could have used that to mine Bitcoin. They could have bought some Bitcoin miners. They didn't. They locked it up, didn't profit in that way, but staked their ETH.
Is that not rent seeking rather than being profitable? Not profitable, productive.
It depends whether you think that having a system of validators is itself good. If it is, then it's both rent-seeking and productive, I guess. You're getting something in return, but you're providing a service, a validating service for the network.
I agree with Andrew about the opportunity cost point. So the multi-sig.
I still agree with Brad's conclusion, by the way.
Yes.
I would take a different route to it.
Yeah. So multi-sig secured on that point. However, I agree with Brad about both Bitcoin and Ethereum are massless, and the way to make block validation costly in Ethereum is not subject to entropy like it is in Bitcoin. So with Bitcoin, the entropy that comes into the system is, like he said, the worn down machines that you eventually have to replace. It's the cost involved in buying electricity and the imperfect human decision making involved in when to mine and how much and how to pay, for so many hashes in a certain amount of time and so on. And people make mistakes. With Ethereum, it's, I have my magic beans, I put them in the magic pot, and I get more magic beans. And there's no constant churn. So in Bitcoin, there is a more constant churn in the power players of the block validation market. And I think that speaks to a more equitable long-term market for the people who are producing blocks.
How much do you think about the kind of end game for Bitcoin, how far it can go, and therefore the profound changes it could have on the entirety of the world? Because if you talk about it being net good for the world, and if it continues to grow and grow, like how profound could this be? I mean, is it, do you consider this as the hundreds of years in the future, they'll look back at the pre-Bitcoin times and see how the world changed?
Silence for Andrew.
I'm looking straight at you, Andrew. Choose Bitcoin. That's a fucking t-shirt.
There you go.
It must be a Choose Bitcoin t-shirt. Anyway, sorry.
There are some who think that Bitcoin will have the kind of profound effects you're talking about, changing human psychology, even changing human nature by warping time preference or eliminating it altogether. I'm pretty skeptical about that myself, in part because human nature is really, really hard to change. Of course, over the grand scope of human evolution, 30,000 years, 50,000 years, we can change in pretty fundamental ways. For example, domesticating animals and taking them into our lives and our homes and becoming friends with dogs. That takes place over tens of thousands of years. Now it's deeply ingrained in us. I suspect that Bitcoin isn't big enough to inaugurate that kind of change, even if you gave it lots of time.
But do you not personally feel that change? Because I certainly have.
But what kind of change is it really, though?
I think it's giving you the ability to think longer term and therefore make different decisions in the moment.
Yeah, but is that sustainable for many generations? So here's why I ask. So at a certain point, the Bitcoin's total market will be relatively saturated. Mm-hmm. You won't have huge amounts of capital flowing in, and so the price appreciation will level off. Maybe it'll level off at like the U.S. dollar inflation or something at like 2% a year. So at that point, the opportunity cost of not buying Bitcoin and your planning will just be like, oh, well, is investing in Tesla in the year 2050 more profitable for me than buying Bitcoin? Then the answer might be yes. And so I'm not sure that Bitcoin provides something special.
But you may not have to chase investments in the same way, though, if your money's not constantly being degraded.
Yeah.
You may have savings.
Yeah, but how much do people really save in the dollar when you have more than $100? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. I'm asking for your case, so if someone can only save in the local currency or Bitcoin, then I think you're right. If they don't have access to other financial instruments, I think that
I think the number of people that save in dollars would be pretty large.
You think so?
I have no data for that, but
I think globally that's probably right. But I think in a place like the United States, I don't see Bitcoin changing human psychology because I don't think the returns will be big enough at some point.
But hold on, could it not have shifted? Could it not? You're talking about long term people down the road, but could the shift not happen over the next decade, 2 decades, as we move to a world that has more Bitcoin and it changes the global incentives? We're living in a fiat world now where it feels like a lot of things are crumbling, and society's fracturing, and Boeing's falling out of the sky, and just things are just not working. People are building you just feel it and you see it everywhere.
Yeah, I can see Bitcoin playing a role in rebuilding institutional trust.
We might want to test this question by looking at the behavior of people who have owned Bitcoin or have used Bitcoin over its 15-year history. If I looked at that, I wouldn't be convinced that these people are long-time preference, patient people. I think, no, actually, they might be even more degenerate than the average human being. So that, just looking at the empirical history we have, of course we know friends.
Present
Of course,
company excluded. Of
maybe,
course.
who can say? Who can say? So of course, maybe we are or know people who insist that Bitcoin has given them the tools to think long term, kind of like having a kid. It extends your time horizon. And yet we also know many people who Bitcoin has given an opportunity to gamble more than they otherwise could have. So I'm not convinced that the empirical evidence we have supports the idea that Bitcoin improves the spirit, the constitution of your preferences, extends your time preference. Maybe for some, maybe not.
I think
So this is an open empirical question. I don't think we should be confident in just a few cases and then extend that for 100 years and say Bitcoin will improve human civilization on that basis.
So it could be a case of Bitcoin could lead to a worse human civilization, but it's not going to change whether it exists or not. It just does exist, and it is there. And what will be, will be.
What will be, will be. Who could disagree with that?
I'm far more interested in the people who don't have access to the U.S. stock market or other alternative savings technologies, and people who don't have ways to leave. So one thing that Bitcoin might be able to do is it might be able to help people accrue wealth by saving in it for a while. And then it might help them escape authoritarianism by leaving wherever they are. And the more that we see countries that use Bitcoin, like El Salvador, that are open to people coming in who have Bitcoin, the more that disciplines not only central banks, but also governments to behave responsibly in ways other than money printing. But we want to keep our people here because they can go anywhere. And for a long time, that hasn't been the case. People haven't had freedom of movement unless they've had significant amounts of capital. That may still be the case. People might not be able to make enough Bitcoin to leave the places that they live in. But if Bitcoin can help a significant, even minority of people be able to leave bad situations, we started out our Bitcoin journey years ago with the story of Roya Maboob and how she was able to pay her employees in Bitcoin. They were able to keep it a secret that they owned the Bitcoin, and then one of them was able to leave an abusive relationship. And there's all kinds of abusive relationships that you might want to leave. For some people, it will be leaving abusive spouses, but for other people, it will be leaving abusive countries that don't want them and that try to harm them. And if Bitcoin can play that kind of role, then I guess I care much less about whether people who can invest in Tesla or Bitcoin will be choosing Tesla or Bitcoin, and much more about whether people who want to leave their bad situations will be allowed to do that by Bitcoin. And I think we all agree that that's more important, and that's the resistance money message, at least. I think it's really interesting that there are all these other aspects of Bitcoin as well, this like nation state adoption and geopolitical whatever. But I mean, I started with these kind of stories, and that's what got me interested in Bitcoin. And so that's every time I think about questions like this, I'm thinking about those kind of people. Where is that employee of Roya's who was able to leave her abusive spouse because of Bitcoin? Where is she now, and where would she have been if Bitcoin didn't exist? She might be dead. She might have stayed in that abusive relationship long enough that eventually she was killed. And so if Bitcoin can help save people's lives in that way, that's what I want.
Well, that goes back to the veil.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that could have been
That's
you,
one of the
Peter.
people you could have been.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You could have been Danny.
No one's that lucky.
That was a very Derek-esque thing to say.
I wasn't going to bring that in.
Derek S.
I'm
Derek
convinced
S.
it's Andrew.
I think if it were, I would know. But
When did we meet at Derek S?
No, the first time I ever met Sam Wooters, I didn't know what he looked like, and he came up and introduced himself as Derek S.
Did he?
And I was like freaking
good.
out for a minute, but no.
Awesome.
So you all know who Derek S is.
Yeah.
Oh, I've saved my screenshots. I have a little folder of them.
Derek S is.
We'll cut this part, right?
Is it
You do not need to give him more
No,
ammunition.
I'm giving William. I love it.
Has he ever had a shout out before in the show?
He's had
I
a few.
think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
Keeps him going.
unless you're Derek S.
I mean, I'm not creative enough to be Derek S.
Look at Danny being so humble. It makes life easier for the rest of us.
The twinkle in his eye
Yeah.
just shines with humility.
Guys, stop.
You mentioned earlier, I wrote it down. You mentioned the imperfections of Bitcoin. Is that something you came to consensus on, or is this just subjective?
No, I think we all acknowledge that at least some portion of Bitcoin mining uses fossil fuels, and I think
Is that an imperfection of Bitcoin, or is that an imperfection of the world?
Is it even an imperfection?
Yeah. Oh, you're such a philosopher.
No, I mean, I don't kind of ascribe too much to the fact that it uses fossil fuels. I don't really mind that.
We try to be pragmatists about this kind of stuff. So don't think about what Bitcoin could be or what it is in theory. Think about its actual effects for real people. We think that there are some negative effects from burning fossil fuels to mine Bitcoin. And
But is it a negative externality, an imperfection of Bitcoin?
I see.
I love
not.
a beer with you guys.
I wouldn't call it an inherent imperfection. In fact,
Right.
we have an empirical argument that isn't inherent because if you look at the trend line, it's going down. So that shows us that it's possible for Bitcoin to exist without it being at this level. In fact, it could be at zero, that negative externality. So maybe you want to call it an imperfection of Bitcoin or a contingent imperfection of Bitcoin. It's the way Bitcoin actually is, but it doesn't have to be that way. That much is clear.
I mean, very, very early on, Hal Finney tweeted, thinking about how to reduce carbon emissions using Bitcoin.
That was week 3, maybe.
Yeah. So very early on, Hal saw something that this isn't an imperfection of Bitcoin. It might take a while for this to come about. And I was thinking by imperfections, you meant something like negative effects on the world.
No, I'm
But
thinking, is there any imperfection?
Structural or conceptual?
Yeah, like you
maybe not.
think, having done this work, if there's any part of Bitcoin you think could have been built differently, coded differently, different rules, any imperfections such as that, the distribution, or is it really guesswork?
I think that at the time, Satoshi did the best he could with respect to the supply schedule, which is just to have it predetermined, and then the curve goes like that in terms of emissions with regular halvings. I suspect that either now or sometime in the future, we'd be able to cook up something a little bit better in this respect, that the supply could respond to demand by looking at on-chain data. So suppose that through on-chain data, you could find out the price of Bitcoin. Obviously, it can't be off-chain data because they need an oracle, a trusted party to report to the chain what the price of Bitcoin was, and then to respond with supply responding to demand in some way. But if we could get price data from the chain itself, that this could have supply modulating algorithmically. So it wouldn't be up to humans deciding, this year to be this year to be that. It would be algorithmically determined, to increase supply a little bit or increase emissions a little bit or decrease them a little bit. That could have a long-term stabilizing effect on Bitcoin's buying power. I don't think anybody's coded this up in a way that makes sense, but I think it's at least in theory possible. So I
Are
would
you about to announce a Bailey coin?
Oh, God, help us.
That's where it always goes.
Prof coin, yes. I'm new to Bitcoin and I'm here to fix it.
Perfection is a really high bar.
Yeah.
And so I think when a lot of people hear someone say Bitcoin is imperfect, they're like,
What? How
you
dare
know,
you?
like, well, how would you have done it? And first, there's an active developer community. They're fixing bugs. They're adding things to Bitcoin. They're bringing Bitcoin closer to certain kinds of ideals. One kind of ideal that I would love for Bitcoin to have eventually, and it may or may not be possible, but I would love for Bitcoin to have more privacy at the base layer. I'm not sure that's possible. I'm not a cryptographer. I don't know much about zero knowledge proofs, but I think the world would be better off if it were possible Bitcoin had more privacy at the base layer. So I think that's an imperfection. As long as we insert the caveat, we're talking about perfection, which may or may not be achievable.
Here's God, here's Bitcoin, and it's not a crime to think that one is higher than the other on the scale of perfection.
I do want to just ask you and we could probably do a whole show on this anyway, but just because it's always on my mind, and it's a complete tangent.
Oh, we like those.
Yeah, no, I just, we talk about the long term of Bitcoin, the long term trajectory, what is good. Yeah, but we're now in a world where like AI is suddenly in everyone's landscape, whether they're using it, thinking about it. I'm just intrigued right now. We don't have to make a whole show on it now. I'm just intrigued where you guys are at with AI and what are you guys are thinking about. And it's probably going to inspire us to do another show with the three of you. Just an AI show. But like, how do you think about AI?
Here's a premise from which we might work. The premise is that autonomous AI agents are in the near future, let's say within our lifetimes. So within the next 40 years, there will be autonomous agents that can do stuff on the internet without being directed to. Now, to really do interesting stuff, you need to have value to transmit on the internet. And even better, value that can be transmitted without somebody's permission and that's unstoppable. Those are plausible premises to start with and support but don't entail the conclusion that AI agents will be using Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the native money of the internet that is permissionless. So if you think those premises are plausible, you should at least think that this is a plausible outcome and then start thinking about what does that mean for humans and for other AI agents.
No, my question is wider than that. I'm interested in what you three think about AI and the profound world that we're heading to and the existential risks. I want to know how much you guys are thinking about this.
I'm pretty underwhelmed by
You're underwhelmed by
AI. Yeah.
All right.
And I mean, largely because I see so much of it turned in as assignments, and I see just how much bullshit AI comes up with because it's only as good as the human output stuff that it's trained on.
So your kids are cheated
All the time.
Okay. And is it obvious?
All the time.
There's no. But hold on. If it wasn't obvious, but do you think any of them are using it in a smart way and getting away with it?
Here's one way to know. You do it yourself. So when I have an assignment, of course, I run everything through GPT 3.5 or 4 and see what the outputs look like and then design assignments accordingly. And when somebody else turns in something that looks like what those outputs look like, I know. Of course, GPT-5 will be better, and I will run my assignments through that and plan accordingly. So I've actually moved to oral exams myself.
But also in that...
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. But also in that, is that not the world we're heading to anyway? And this is the new calculator.
Maybe, but calculators do one thing really, really fast. They don't create new things. You don't see a calculator pose a mathematical problem and then solve it. You don't see calculators providing proofs of previously unsolved problems. Right. And you don't see AI do that either. Right now, it merely replicates what it has seen, maybe does some synthesis, often very poorly. If you started an AI and trained it on nothing and said, come up with your own data to train yourself on and don't give it access to anything produced by people, then you don't get anything out of it. So a future where AI is actually taking steps forward seems pretty distant to me. Right now, all I'm getting is what I've seen, but slightly better than the median of what I've seen.
I suspect Brad is the most skeptical. I'm somewhere in the middle, and then Craig is the most optimistic.
Is that typical in everything?
Almost everything, yeah. I tend to be in the middle.
Interesting.
Okay.
Is that right, you think?
You tend to be in the middle, yeah. It's not necessarily skeptical and optimistic are the opposite ends, but...
Yeah, I'm a non-doomery, non-utopian optimist.
Just another tool.
It's just another tool, and it's amazing. I think the trend lines are pretty clear, that the tools will become more and more useful, that when we're grandparents, our grandchildren will say, man, how did they live without those things? It's like we do with our great grandparents, like not having like toilets and plumbing or something. And I think that, someday when our grandchildren are, leaving our like assisted living rooms, they'll just be like, man, they've seen so much. Just think about what they've been through and how the internet was so simple when they were growing up. And I think the trend lines are pretty clear. I think that there will be large benefits, especially in medicine and travel. And
And you don't think it will kill us?
I don't think it will kill us. So like the doomery futures that are painted by people who are largely in like the AI safety community, I think that these people I'm not sure that they're misinformed so much as I'm not so sure that they're scaremongers either. I think a lot of them operate in good faith, but I don't see a path towards these kinds of futures where, you know, like so one future is like you have like a singularity or something, or an AGI that like takes over the world, and I don't really see this. And some of the risks are risks that we already have. You know, like they might say, oh, you can ask, you know, ChatGPT, you know, how to build a bomb. Like, well, you can already Google this, you know, and if you know chemistry and physics, you can already do lots of these things. So what unique risks is AI adding to the world? But on the other hand, I mean, there will be risk. I'm not saying it's going to be riskless. I'm not saying that bad things won't happen. There might be like new diseases created. You know, these things will probably happen. But on the benefit side, think about the way that we might be able to cater medical treatments to particular genetic patterns. I hope that happens, and I think that it will. And I think that I think it's probably likely within our lifetimes. So I'm optimistic. Like, so my optimism is like this. I think that or I hope in like 10 to 20 years, we'll have these kinds of AI powered like genetic immunotherapy treatments that will be able to eradicate certain kinds of diseases.
I think there's a book in this.
Yeah, have you written it?
No, I will write it. AI will write it. Resistance bots.
Until AI can write a book.
Resistance bots. I like that.
Resistance bots.
Bots. Yeah.
The AI resistance army.
Yeah.
Powered by Bitcoin.
Yeah. There you go.
All righty. Anything we not covered?
Yeah, Bradley has a little announcement.
What?
Sorry, not a little announcement. That's very
Huge.
Well, I'm speaking at the conference on Saturday, and I'll be announcing the formation of the University of Wyoming Bitcoin Research Institute.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah. www.uwyo.edu/Bitcoin.
You never tell me the secrets. Oh, hold on. What is this? Tell me. Oh my God.
Start with the problem.
The problem is Mora et al. Bitcoin on track to raise global temperatures by 2 degrees. The problem is people declaring Bitcoin as dead in the media. The problem is academic papers that miss aspects of Bitcoin and come to erroneous conclusions because they don't know things like the difficulty adjustment or the Lightning Network or all sorts of other things that Bitcoiners are aware of. And so more academic Bitcoin research needs to be done by people who understand Bitcoin.
Amazing.
Who know the aspects of it. And that is not rewarded right now by the university and academic system. People can't write dissertations or master's theses on Bitcoin. And so they receive no incentive to do that. And they need to be incentivized. The Bitcoin Policy Institute is doing a ton of this, but it's outside of universities. And so we felt the need to establish an institute within a university that can bring together scholars who understand Bitcoin from all the disciplines that Bitcoin touches, which is philosophy, economics, law, computer science, climate science, energy, all these sorts of things. Bring them together to have conversations, to work on stuff, to get encouragement and be part of a community, and then to output peer-reviewed academic research that's responsible and that understands Bitcoin, which can then filter down to journalists and get rid of the bad journalistic headlines.
Fuck yeah.
Obviously, Wyoming is the place to do this.
Yes.
Everyone knows that.
Fuck
I don't
you,
have to give
DeFreeze.
that case.
We're coming for you, bitch.
So we got $1.5 million
Yep.
from Mark Casey, $10 from Craig. And with that,
I was the second donor.
With that seed gift,
I was the third. I gave 11.
the first big expenditure of the Institute is that starting in fall 2025, Andrew Bailey's moving to Wyoming,
That's right.
and we're starting the center together.
This is a big announcement. So getting
is.
the three of you together is going to be a lot easier.
Yeah.
Just one plane to Bedford.
Or one plane to Wyoming.
You've not been to Wyoming, have you?
never been.
It's fucking great.
Yeah, I know. I do want to go.
It's great. We can get Denver in on the same. We'll fly to Denver, hang out there, and then
So
drive
much
up.
for giving up on the flights.
No, this
Some flights are worth it.
this is a holiday.
Nice.
I love that. Congratulations. That's
Thank you.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's absolutely amazing. Needed. And fuck you, DeFreeze. We're coming for you. All right. Well, listen, Resistance Money. Listeners, go buy this book. It's $30 now.
That's right.
Available at Amazon.
Available everywhere.
Available everywhere. Go buy it. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for listening. Roll on conference.
All love, Pete.
Thanks,
All
Pete.
love.